Howdy folks, I'm here again at Burley House to see if we can get some decent shots in 2019. The Sony DCS F828 is an 8 megapixel camera released in August 2003, making it nearly 16 years old. So how does this teenager perform in 2019? Is it a charm or is it a terror? The sensor in this camera is a 2/3 inch, but it's not a standard Bayer array. Instead it has an RGBE colour filter. Sony claimed this expanded the colour gamut, thereby improving the colour response to the images that come out of the camera. To help with this sensor goodness, the camera sports a Carl Zeiss T28 to 200mm equivalent, making it a 7x zoom with a maximum aperture of f2 at the short end and f2.8 through to the long end of the range. The really nice thing with this lens is that it's a mechanical zoom, something that always feels better in the hand than using the electronic rocker switch to extend the lens. And speaking of handling, this is something that was quite unique at the time. It has a very chunky base with a mechanism that allows the whole of the lens assembly to rotate up or down, the equivalent of tilty screens that we see in many of today's cameras. The camera is a bit unwieldy though, so it's not a camera that's particularly easy to use single-handed, particularly given that there's no image stabilization, so a second hand keeping the lens steady becomes almost essential at the long end of the zoom. The images this camera is capable of capturing are quite lovely, so maybe Sony wasn't fibbing about the RGB array. The photos here were mostly JPEGs with some processing in Lightroom, and the camera is capable of capturing RAW. Shooting RAW does massively slow the camera down though, to the point where I decided not to use this format. One of the biggest drawbacks cameras of this age sometimes present are the memory card formats that they support. Fortunately here the F828 along with Sony's memory stick duos also support CF cards, so trying to find media that works with the camera isn't really an issue. But probably the biggest drawback, which will surprise no one, is the ISO performance. Whilst the bright lens does help a bit here, the sensor within the camera is still tiny, making this camera useful for sunny days and not something you'd really want to use in the dark. So is the Sony F828 a viable camera in 2019? Well, I think the photos speak for themselves. This cranky teenager camera is capable of producing some fabulous photos, even if this one has had a bit of a hard life.